Hi there, Steve here, continuing my 90-day Korean challenge. Today I want to talk about mistakes. But first of all, if you enjoy these podcasts about language learning, please subscribe to my channel. Mistakes. Yesterday, and I should say, by the way, I'm going to start putting up these videos, these discussions that I've had with Hannah in Korean. I'll put one right up after this one, and maybe there's about 4 or 5 that we've done, and I'll schedule them across the next 10 days or so. Those of you who speak Korean will hear that I make mistakes. In fact, it's interesting. We had a discussion yesterday, and I was determined that I was going to use this phrase, which means nevertheless, which is 그럼에도 불구하고. 그럼에도 불구하고. I had even practiced it ahead of time because I had heard it a number of times in the podcast that I was listening to. However, when it came time to use it, maybe because I had tried so hard to remember it, of course I got it wrong. I got it close. I think I said 그래도 불구하고 instead of 그럼에도 불구하고. And I'm going by memory. And so the interesting thing about mistakes is we sometimes remember that we made a mistake even though we made the mistake. We can be corrected and make the mistake again. We sometimes get it right one time and get it wrong the next time. So mistakes are a sort of organic part of speaking in a foreign language. Gradually, the number of mistakes we make gets smaller. Most of the mistakes we make, we discover ourselves. Or through a lot of exposure and use and listening and reading, we refine these mistakes away mostly ourselves. To some extent, correction can help, although there's a lot of research that shows that it doesn't help a great deal. I know from personal experience that when I correct people, they come right back with the same mistake. I know, for example, with my Russian tutor, I'll make a mistake. She corrects it in my link, report. I read it. And yet the next time I speak, I'll get the same mistake corrected. I just can't seem to get that particular expression or use of words or whatever it is right. That's absolutely normal. And it's not because you get corrected that you're going to get it right. And we don't know how long it will take before you are able to rid yourself of that pattern, that your brain has a tendency to go in a certain direction some of the time, most of the time, occasionally hit it right. I always use the example of people who speak English, and despite the fact that everyone knows, at least theoretically, that it's the third person singular has an S, he goes, he knows, she does. The number of people who continue to say he go, she do, because it takes a long time to get rid of these mistakes. I don't consider making mistakes such a big problem. Obviously, if you are working in the country and you're sending out official correspondence, you can't make mistakes. You have to be so good that you don't make mistakes. But for most people who are learning languages, making mistakes is not a problem, and I don't mind exposing my mistakes. So that's briefly. Now, I mentioned that because on our forum at Link, somebody posted an article from Luca Lamporiello's blog, where he has a guest article there by Anthony Lauder, who is a person who lives in Prague. I gather speaks Czech. I've never heard him speak Czech, and I don't know if he speaks other languages, but he is very active in the sort of polyglot community. And his perspective always is that you don't need many words to consider yourself fluent. And that we should focus rather on being fluent with a few words. And I very much disagree with this. Obviously, language learning is very much an individual journey. So everything depends on what you want to do. And if you live where the language is spoken, which was for me the case when I lived in Japan, then you start speaking early, again, with mistakes. If you're studying away from where the language is spoken, then what you do depends on what you feel like doing. In my own case, I like listening and reading because it enables me to engage with the language, to engage with meaningful content. I measure how much I engage with the language by the number of words that Link tells me I know. Those are passive vocabulary items. I don't hang my hat on this as saying I know all these words, but what it tells me is that I have spent so much time listening and reading that the words that I haven't saved or the words that I saved and then converted to known is this large number. This represents a major engagement with the language. Now, when I go to speak, I'm going to make mistakes. The more I speak, the better I get. Whether I choose to start speaking early or late is a personal decision. But in this article of Anthony Lauder's, he comes on very strongly to say that, in traditional language instruction, people used to count words, which of course is not true. Traditional language instruction was very much based on teaching grammar rather than keeping track of known words. I believe that keeping track of known words is a great sort of Gordian knot, simple measurement of the extent to which you have been engaged with the language. Now, if you haven't been writing, you won't be able to write well. If you've relied entirely on reading without listening, then your listening comprehension won't be very good. But potentially, if you have a large vocabulary, your potential ability to develop all of your language skills is very high. If, for example, you have a great degree of fluency around very simple, limited context, then there's still a long road before you'll be able to understand movies, understand podcasts, read books. On the other hand, if you are able to read a novel in the language, but don't speak very well, I think if you are committed to speaking and you spend a lot of time speaking, your speaking will catch up very quickly. So I personally believe, and that's what we do at Link, we say we measure your known words. That's the sort of ultimate milestone of how far you have progressed in the language. Now, if you want to improve in a particular skill, then you have to focus on that skill. I make a point of listening even more than I read, and I read a lot, because that way my brain is also getting used to the language. Now, again, Lauder goes on to say we should, rather than focusing on, and he says that the European framework of reference is focusing more now on what you can do with the language rather than your, say, word count. But the point is, if you look at the advanced levels in the European framework, they all imply a large vocabulary. Otherwise, you can't talk or write about subjects on a wide range of issues. You don't understand them. So B2, C1, C2 requires a large passive vocabulary, not all of which, obviously, you can activate. Lauder also encourages us to spend time with these scenarios, pretending we're at the post office, pretending we're here, pretending we're there. I have never found those not very interesting to do. I would rather spend my time trying to follow the recent political scandals in Korea than practicing going to the post office with a tutor, either live or on Link or whatever. But again, this is entirely personal. It depends on what people want to do. I believe that when I have a real need to spend a lot of time at Korean stores and post offices and things of that nature, that I will learn that by going to those places and trying to explain what I want and getting answers that I don't understand. And my experience has been that even where I have had this scenario of what to do at the train station, when I go to the train station, in fact, the context is quite different from my scenario. So I don't consider those things very much fun to do, and I don't find them all that useful. But if people want to do that, that's fine too. So, and the idea, and he also makes the point, this Lauder article on Luke, in fact, I'll leave a little link to it. He says there are people with very large word counts who, when they speak the language, they stumble. I don't know if he's referring to me or someone who has used Link and has a high word count. I have a high word count in Korean. When I speak Korean, I stumble. Of course, I haven't spoken very much. Whenever you go to speak, you're going to stumble. You're going to make mistakes. It's normal to make mistakes. The more you speak, the fewer mistakes you'll make. However, if you have a large vocabulary, then your ability to comprehend what the other person is saying and to express and cover a large, more interesting, meaningful subjects in your conversation rather than just sort of the scenario of going to the post office. You're going to be able to tackle more satisfying, authentic, meaningful subjects. And the greater your passive vocabulary, in my opinion, the more confident you are. Even if you stumble and struggle, at least you understand what the other person is saying. But I want to make sure that why I'm saying this is, I think language learning is very much personal. The fact that a person has, like I have large word count in Korean, I put up this video of myself speaking Korean, I struggle, I make a lot of basic mistakes. So what? It's me and my language. It's really not for others to come along and say, well, he's not really very good. I'm not there to perform in order to demonstrate that I'm very good or not so good. Look at me, and in 2 months I'm able to do all of this. It's not that. It's demonstrating that in fact it takes a long time, and I don't mind showing my gradual progress, hopefully towards a better level. And if I speak more, and if I could find more people to talk to here, then I would speak better. But that doesn't take away from the enjoyment that I have. I said the other day I was in a restaurant, some people were speaking Polish. We didn't speak much Polish. They quickly got back to English. Good for me, because I would have really stumbled in Polish. But I can listen to podcasts about world events in Polish, which gives me a great deal of satisfaction. So based on my needs here in Vancouver, that satisfies me. If I were in Poland for a month, then my speaking skills would improve. Although for the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I would make a lot of mistakes. And I think the making of mistakes is just comes with the territory. That's basically part of learning a language. So there you have it. Mistakes, you don't correct them right away. I still believe that vocabulary count as a measure of your degree of engagement with the language, your potential with the language. Many people, say immigrants who are in Canada and say, I can read, but I can't speak very well, then if you ask them, well, do you read novels? When you go home in the evening, do you watch local television, or do you watch television or CDs from your home country? So if they're not engaging with the language, then their language potential is going to be limited, although they might have perfected a routine for their basic needs, whatever they may be, at the shop and stuff like that. But maybe that's all they want to achieve, and then that's fine. But then let's not pretend that that's some form of fluency. The fluency, as I said before, is B2 and better. And to do that, you need a large vocabulary. But you can make mistakes, and before you get to B2, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Anyway, I kind of rambled a bit here, but it's a subject that comes up all the time. And now if you want to hang on, you can listen to my Korean discussion with Hannah, the first of many. And you'll see that I make a lot of mistakes if you're familiar with the Korean language. Bye for now.